Okay, thanks, Brian. I tried to give you a little bit of an overview of what has happened with the elasmobranch chain part of the FAITAG, but I thought it will be first, it's handy to give a little bit of an idea of what is a stat book and what is a monitoring, and that we all talk about the same things. There are so many different elasmobranchs, and there are even much more fish species. So to have for every species a stat book or a program will be very, very hard. Then we need 15 rooms full of people here. So we have to make choices in that perspective. But I think it's a question why we need to do that. Are we sustainable in our collection management? It's an open question, and I'm not going to say yes or no, but it's an open question that we often have to ask ourselves. How far am I sustainable in the management? I saw some very nice talks this morning from Lyle and from Laura about how one dealer is working on better sustainable collection management. I think that's a very, very good step. But we also have our own responsibility as a public aquarium to see, how should we have a better collection management. I go one step further even. How long can we still buy fish? And of course, this is an impossible question to ask. But if you look at the fluffy stuff in the zoos, that is more and more difficult. You see, for example, in EASA, that nearly no mammal is bought anymore from the trade. And they all try to organize it within stat books, in between the different zoos. Okay, this is a step way beyond where we will come with the fish, but I think still it's something to keep in your mind and think about it. And I'm not sure, we can say, okay, we can buy them for many, many, many years still, but maybe governments are starting to say, what are you doing about it? How are you looking at it? Or they even stop. And that will be a disaster for public aquaria. I did a census, and some of you have seen this already in 2011 on a couple of European public aquaria. 65 colleagues answered, so really great, thank you very much. And the result was that we had about 41 species at that time in the 65 European aquaria on sharks, 50 species of rays and 1 chimera species. And that's about the same as around 14% of all species living in the oceans and seas in the world. So that's a reasonable number of species we have all in display, and this is only 65 aquaria. To give you a number, in this census, the number was more than 3,000 animals. So it's a lot of animals. It's still a lot of animals. Nothing to compare with nature, but still a lot of animals. Well, there are different program types that you can that we can work on. I just give you a short overview on that. Well, the most common is the ESB. It's for the EASA definition, but well, I don't know which definition we want to use, but it's a medium intensity level of management. Normally every year should there be a stat book overview that you have a little bit of an idea what is happening within the stat book. When it's possible, you should do genetic analysis, but often it's not possible. Often we are not that far. Many stat books are not actively breeding yet with the species or have a big population. So genetic analysis is possibly something which is a little bit far away from us. But it's something we have to keep in mind as coordinator, because you don't want to put a brother and a sister together. As a stat book keeper, you can provide breeding and transfer recommendation. This is scary for some people. I advise you to bring your animal there to that aquarium. That sounds very scary. Of course, within an ESB, you are not obliged to do it. So it's your own choice still. Do you want to do that or not want to do that? I think it's good for the whole population. If a coordinator thinks maybe we should have a couple there together and not a female there and a male there. But I can understand that some aquaria will say, yeah, but this is for us a very charismatic species. We cannot get, we don't want to get it out of our collection. But you have to start opening the discussions in that perspective. When you are a stat book keeper, it's very interesting to hear what is happening with the species. There are always husbandry problems. And especially when you are a central person for a specific species, you hear all these problems. And you also get a lot of data of animals. Why did the animals die, for example? At the moment, I'm looking at why the stegostomas died in the last 10, 15 years. What was the cause? And if you look then at 50 animals, you have a little bit of an idea what problems there are within that species, and maybe you can tackle some of these problems. And that's very, very interesting as a coordinator. Try to publish a husbandry guideline. We were just talking about the seahorse guideline. It really will help if you have a little bit of a guideline for the specific species. But it's a lot of work, and I think you should do something like that in steps, and don't expect too much to be done in no time. And when I talk about the EASA rules, non-EASA members, and there are many also in the room here, can still participate within this program. And that does not account for all the programs that EASA has. So for this, I think it's a very good option for fish management. If we look at what happened in the last couple of years, you see that in 2007, the two first studbooks started, one on Tenura lima, organized by Nuria from Lisbon, and one on Stegostoma, which I organized. And it's nice to see that since then, more and more studbooks are coming up. We are now at 9. Yeah, what is 9? But still, it is 9. It's much more than 0. And it's really nice to see that there is so much interest, both from the coordinators, but also from you who are participating. It's really, really nice to see as a coordinator this change. Another program we have is the monitoring P, as they call it, monitoring population program. It's a much lower intensity level of management, so it's easier to coordinate as a coordinator. You even can have 1 or 2 different coordinators that can help each other. Again, there should be every year a trend overview that you know what the population, what happens within the population. You can monitor a little bit the husbandry problems, but it's very much depending on your own time, on your own interest, on the species, how far you want to go. The most important for monitoring program is to see what is happening with the captive population in Europe. Are there births or not? So you will learn them more about. And even if you... Oh, hello. Even if you're not... Even if you're not having the species and you're interested in that species, you can just look at the list and say, they are coordinating that species. Maybe they know where there are some surplus for that species. And that can also help you in getting animals. Again, this is also open for non-EASA members, so I think it's a very good program for our community. A third program is the monitoring trend program. And via EASA rules, this is much more a coordinated program by the TAG, or the TAG chair, or whoever is within the TAG. It can be a whole group, or it can be only one person, that make a census now and then and sees what the whole population of Elasmobranchs is doing, like the one I did in 2011. And I'm still thinking of, and maybe I can get some help from some people, to do that again, for example, in 2016. To see if there is big changes or not within the Elasmobranch population in Europe. And also maybe gather more information from more public aquaria. That would be really nice. We have had a few monitoring T programs, and to be honest, Brian and myself were discussing this. Should we not all put them on the level of a monitoring P level? And I asked also the coordinators of the monitoring T programs, is that okay when we do that? So that was approved, unless one of you have problem with it. But I think it's better to have only 2 type of programs at the moment for fish, in any case, within the Elasmobranchs. But you never know what's going to happen in the future, so you have to keep it open. A fourth is the EEP. The European Endangered Species Program. This is the highest intensity level of management within EASA animal management programs. And this is another cup of tea. You have to have a selected group of people working on it. You have a special committee. There are very strict rules of non-EASA people participating. If the coordinator says, well, I advise you to bring that female to that aquarium, you're obliged to do that. That's something really else. So I don't think this is what we should do now at the moment. Although you can start to think about very, very rare species that are not kept on a very regular basis, that we really should be more proactive with the group that have that species to put couples together and try to breed for the future. But this is a very heavy, well, I call it heavy, but it's a highest intensity level management type, and currently there are no fish programs for it. And the question is if we should have that already within a couple of years. I don't know. We will see what is the development of all the programs. But there are some very difficult points within the EEP. To get a little bit of an idea of what is happening within the elasmobranchs in captive Europe, Brian and consortium organized a workshop at ZSL in London last April, and I want to give you a short overview of what was discussed there. It was a regional collection planning workshop, and then we first need to know a little bit what is a regional collection planning, an RCP. You often hear that somebody saying RCP. An RCP is that you are organizing a little bit the species which are in captive Europe, and that you look, is it a potential animal or not to be put in a stud book or in a monitoring or in an EEP or in whatever level of management. There's a decision tree to do that. I will not go too deep in that because we did that already in April, but it's just to give you a little bit of an overview. But in any case, it defines the species that will go into a management plan. Three major points are looked at per species. So there's a conservation part, an education part, and a research part. And if you look, for example, on the conservation part, we have to look for a specific species. What is the status of this species? Well, we don't know, but the IUCN knows that. They have a very good, thorough database where we can look on what the status is. Can we work together with a specialist group or not from the IUCN? Can you do in situ conservation programs around that species? Is there even a reintroduction potential? This is a dangerous one, because reintroduction back into the nature from captive born or even captive held animals, there are very strict rules for that. You don't want to have any diseases which you, of course, not have in your aquarium, but still maybe the animal has it with him, and you bring it into nature, back into nature, and the disease will be a problem there because of your reintroduction. I think that you have to be really, really careful with that. Education. What is the taxonomic uniqueness of this species? How is it within your collection? What is the distribution in EUAC EASA region? All questions you have to look at per species to know a little bit, is it a potential animal or not to put in an RCP or to be put into a program. Do you have to add something there, Brian? Yeah. The result of the RCP was that we wanted to add a couple of more ESBs. We wanted to start a lot of monitoring programs. That was something new. There was no monitoring program yet within Europe on elasmobranchs, and we decided to have 30 different programs. So that's quite a lot. And of course, it needs time to develop all these programs, and it needs you to get the information from, but also to coordinate. So this is something we have to work on in the next coming years, and hopefully we will get more and more programs off the ground and see if we can manage in a better way. Well, I just made an overview of the captive species which came out of the census, and then looking at the IUCN status, so critical endangered, vulnerable, near threatened, least concerned, or data deficient. And you just look at the number of species in this graph. And this is where we are now with the programs. If the programs we advised from the RCP to start and you see that these species will hopefully become a part of a program. So I think that looks already really promising. But I can talk a lot about all these things, but why should you get involved? Because that's, of course, the next question. We really need every aquarium within Europe that wants to look a little bit further on. You can possibly get new blood for the species you have. That's something which is always handy, especially when you're breeding already for a while with that particular species, or when you only have a male or a female, you need mostly another sex as well. You will receive an update every year. It can be on an EUAC, but it can also be via email or via the website. We make sure that on the website you always have the latest overviews of that particular species, but also the old overviews. If you want to look back on a certain species, it will be handy to have all these different overviews. You may get interesting info. Maybe you may not get it. Well, we see. We need to see how that will develop. And you will learn where all these animals are from that particular species. And that can be handy because, for example, we have a couple of epaulet sharks and we are breeding them already for quite a while. And yeah, it would be really nice to have new blood, or that we have a new male. Or, oh, and then I see that there is also one just around the corner also breeding with that. So sometimes it's more easy that you know from the whole group where a particular species is. That can help yourself also with your own management. And sometimes it's much easier to get it just around the corner than to get it from southern of Europe when you're living in the north of Europe. So logistics can be handy there as well. But to be able to get that information from the coordinators, it's you who has to start typing. You have to give the information to the coordinator. Many coordinators will contact you in the coming month about their program. Please answer if you have that species, or even please answer if you're interested in that species. And give as much information as possible. And this is difficult. This is not always easy, because not everybody is having a big registration system within their collection. And that's difficult. Sander was giving a nice talk about ZIMS. Well, that's one way of doing registration, but it's really, really important to know where the animals originally came from. And if they came from a wholesale, that's not enough. You need to know more about them. A wholesale in Germany or in England, yeah, that's not enough to start a program around. You need to know where the animal originally comes from. Also, what has happened with these animals? When did animals die, or when did they get young, or well, you know all about that. But it's really important for a stud bookkeeper or a monitoring coordinator to get all this type of information. And sometimes it's really shocking to see how much you can get out of it. So really, please send as much information as possible. To give you a little bit of an overview, who are the coordinators? Of course, this will be on the website, so you don't have to write it down. But if you see a species that you have and you don't have it yet in the program, please write it down and contact the coordinator. So this is for the ESB. Monitorings, programs on sharks and chimera. Big list. A lot of coordinators stepped forward, and I'm really, really proud to see that this is happening. And of course, not all monitoring programs that are proposed in April are running already 100%. You cannot expect that. We are all doing that in our, well, nearly in our free time, because we think it's important. We want to go forward, but it takes time for every coordinator to do this work. And yeah, sometimes it lasts a little bit. But I hope in the end of this year that most program coordinators are starting to work on their program. I will chase them. Monitoring P coordinators for rays. A big list. Well, this is what I wanted to tell you about the RCP and about yeah, what is happening now with the programs on the elasmobranchs. I want to give the word to a couple of coordinators to show what they are doing within their program, that you have a little bit of a feeling what is happening with that particular species. So it's a lot of reports. Some are very short, but it's just to give you a short overview. I think that's the most important part. So I would like to ask first Daniel to come forward and tell about Neotrigon cooley.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
Yeah.
First I have to dig into the data. Oops. And find my presentation. The mouse is helpful. Oops. The lower center. Let's see. Different. Neotrigon. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your patience. My name is Daniel, and I try to track the blue spotted masquerade. Many of you know this species. It's a handy ray species, fits into smaller aquaria, and the stud is running since several years. But before I tell you about the animals in the aquaria, I just want to tell you about the status of the species in the wild. When I started with the stud book, I tried to find information about their status and looked into the IUCN red list, and the information in there did not change very much. It's listed still as the most important capped elasmobranch species with nets. And the catches have been increasing in the last years, so it's not very astonishing that they end up in fish markets. So this is a common picture from Southeast Asian fish markets. Neotrigon cooley is heavily used as a food fish, and therefore we thought it may be important to care for this species a little bit more and create a stud book. How are the animals which we keep? Hopefully in a better condition. Of course they are. Since we started to keep records, this was basically Max, in 2000, the total number of animals recorded has risen to 111. There's a little bias towards the female Neotrigon cooleys. Every single animal has a unique ESP number from 1 to 111. These 111 animals, 60, almost a half of them are alive by today, and 50 are historical. So this is the very crude look into the database, very quick. The number of captive births has risen to 74 in the meanwhile. Almost the half of them are alive, the other half is historical. And again, you see a little bias towards female births. Maybe this is natural, we don't have any data from the nature. Yeah, this is the state of the animals. How are the aquaria keeping it? The aquaria, number 22 aquaria reported the species. All of them try to keep breeding pairs. This is a geographical overview of Europe, of course, and every yellow dot resembles one aquarium keeping them. So there is a little bias towards the northwest of Europe. Overall 22. These are the names of the institutions which reported the species to me and take part in this stud book. Starting in Austria, and the end is the United Kingdoms. The recent addition is Universium Göteborg, so even a Scandinavian aquarium is already reporting species and tries to participate. As said, about 8 aquaria breed them. this is the status of the breeding pairs by today. Arnhem, Madrid, Haus des Meeres, Vienna, Bremerhaven in Germany, Torquay in the United Kingdom, again a breeding pair in Arnhem, and 2 breeding groups exist, one of them in Göteborg and the other one in Paris in the Sina Aquarium. Breeding group means that we don't know who the father is. There's one female and lots of males in this situation, therefore they are not, they're listed as multiple groups here. Yeah, this is the short situation. Yeah, what happened with the animals which were bred in this aquarium? We tried to distribute them to other aquaria, either to start the collections to keep this animal or to form new breeding pairs. Here you see the transports we made the last year. Most of the animals came from Arnhem. Max is the most successful breeder, and of course his group. And we distributed them to Emmen Zoo, to Hungary, Sosto Zoo, Vienna, of course. Sea life centers in Weymouth and Brighton received animals. And we tried to refresh the situation in Hull. There are old males which need new blood. And here we are already. Which problems do we have right now? Sudden death in the morning is one problem. Animals that have been eating well the last months and years die. Suddenly, we don't know really why this happens, but we suspect the food to be bad, and it may be just a husbandry problem. The next time this occurs, we will try to look into the hygienic situation on the food. The highest survival rate, that's the good situation, of course, is in Arnhem in the Burger Zoo. What's the lookout with this stud book? Yeah, one thing is to improve the husbandry, the feeding regime, and the other thing is that we try to put the basis of this stud book on a stable fundament. We need to improve the genetic makeup of our breeding groups. In April, we had an advisor, John Fitzpatrick from the University of Manchester, at the symposium, and he had a quick view on the pedigrees of our breeding race, and he said right now he doesn't think that there is some inbreeding going on, but it would be wise to add wild blood to our groups. This we did. We obtained 2 wild-caught animals and hope that they add to the genetic makeup. This is one thing, adding wild blood, and the other thing is we try to combine unrelated pairs. Of course, this is one thing which is very important. Involves transport, which is longer than good for your pockets, but this is just a small investment of money for a good basis of the genetic basis of this breeding group. This is the last slide. This is a newborn. A few weeks ago, was born in Vienna, and with this picture I would like to thank you for your attention.